Hey guys, Chip here, and today I want to do part 3 of the Ghost in the Shell series. In this part, I'm going to talk about how we're going to create trim sheets to be used to add detail to the interior and objects in the room. And before I get started, what I thought I would do is look at some Ghost in the Shell sketches. I have a couple sketchbooks that I bought when I was in Japan 20 years ago when this thing came out, and I became enamored with the design aesthetic that they created, especially in the sketches. And this is one of the tanks, and I know this is an interior, but it does give you a little bit of the aesthetic of what Ghost in the Shell is about. And ideally, it's very mechanical, geometric. It's got a lot of these little details, which is a reoccurring theme. These little tiny blivets, I call them, they're all over. And of course, the sketches are really nice as well. But as you can see, here's an actual picture from the book that I took a photo of. But again, it's an interior of one of the labs, and it's based on all these rings. And it's also got a lot of, look at all these little dots here. They're not, it's not noise on the page. It's actually just little detail. Here's a close-up of that same thing. Again, we've got a lot of these little dots and these geometric panels. And here we're seeing, this is a control station, and here's the actual place where they're building the android, and there's multiple levels here. This would be a really cool render to create. And again, a lot of the same kinds of details we saw earlier. One of the things I like about this is how it contrasts a lot of the geometric forms with some of the softer forms for the legs. And here is a motorcycle. This is some color stuff showing how it translated from a sketch into the final image. Again, these tiny little details are really interesting. More color work. This is showing a briefcase that unfolds into some kind of gun. And again, when you look at these, there's a lot of the same kind of design language. As you can see, there are a number of different, very recognizable forms, but they're created in such a way that they generate something pretty unique. This laser sighter is a pretty interesting thing here. Here's one of their helicopters for snipers, and these little wings come up. Again, very amorphous, yet lots of very regular shapes as well. And then again, once again, we're seeing these little dots, all these little squares and little details that contrast nicely with the overall form. And I don't think this is Ghost in the Shell. This I found somewhere on Pinterest, I think. But I looked at it and thought, yeah, that's probably a good example of what a trim sheet ought to look like for this kind of project. It's got basically a lot of geometric areas, these little details, some interior cutouts. So we might want to create some of these shapes and see if we can't place them in a way that makes sense on our trim sheet. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I'm going to grab that trim sheet image that we were just talking about. I'm going to drag and drop it, put it in here. Let's turn off perspective and go to top view real quick. And then I'm going to just take that image and just drag and drop it right here. And let's center it on 0. And let's rotate it. R, control, let's just give it this. Let's make it this way. We'll have the trim sheets typically go left to right, up and down. It doesn't really matter, but in this case, we're going to do it this way. Now, with that done, we can actually cut directly on this if we want to, or we can create a whole new object and model on that. And I think that's what I want to do, is create a whole new object. And let's talk about that real quick. I'm going to use KitOps and Design Magic for this. And there's a million ways to do this, of course. So we're going to use Design Magic to do this. First, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add just a regular Design Magic cube in here, just using nothing selected, add insert. And then I'm going to basically say, remove the KitOps props. Let's go ahead and just get rid of that material for now. And what I want to do is let's go to the top view. And let's just scale this about whatever size we want it to be, something like that. There we go. And let's drop it down. Control A, let's just use scale, let's drop it down. Okay, let's just tab into this and let's grab it, move it down just a little bit, something like that. Actually, let's take it all the way to the bottom right here and make sure that this under options auto merges to off, right? So that means I can move it back up. Let's make it 0.25. Okay, so now, of course, I've got the problem that I can't really see my template below. So I'm going to go into solid view here, and I'll go into X-ray view, and now I can see the template. So I'm in pretty good shape. So the next thing I want to do is, let's go ahead and start cutting this up. And the way I'm going to do that is, I think I'm going to cut a couple of these lines vertically first. And let me show you what I'm talking about. So let's go ahead and I'm going to grab a cutter. So this is the Union's cutters basic object. So I'm going to go into cutter. And I'm going to grab one of these. I've got a parting line one here. There's parting, simple parting line. Here it is. It's either one of these. I'll just grab this one right here. And I'll select the object that I want to put it on. Make sure that, because that was a KitOps object, we have to remove the KitOps props, which we already did. And let's just turn on here and let's say add insert and let's just drag it over here, like something like this. The Alt key down, let's rotate it a little bit. There we go, something like that. And then we'll go to the top view and we'll go Alt Z. And with that set, what I want to do is create something similar to what we're looking at here. I'll tab into this and I'll go to my point view and I'm going to just take all these and X, delete the vertices, take this one, and I can say E for extrude. And X, we'll take it straight down and select all, and let's just move it over here. Something like that. And then I'm going to move this straight down. I think this is a straight down shot. So I'll just go all the way down. And now with this vertice selected, let's go Shift D, Y, and I'll move it over here. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'll do E, X, and I'll move it up. And I can actually just grab these two and say Shift D, Y, and move it over here. So I've got those set up. And they're a little bit, they're a little larger than what I probably may want. Let's go into our objects and we're just going to basically with this screw. So the screw is going to control the depth, as you can tell, which is fine. And then we'll go into a solidify, which is going to control the thickness that we're cutting through. So we go to solidify, we'll just move this down just a little bit. Whoops. Something like maybe that. If I want this one to be a little bit thicker, I can just select this and just say separate by selection. Tab out of it, tab into this, and we'll make this one just thickness, just a little thicker, something like that. And now we're going to tab into this and I'm going to grab some of these and let's make this the thin one. So I'm going to say Shift D, I'm going to move it over here and I'll make it E, Y, just move it over here. Select these and P, separate the selection. Now we can edit this one. Notice I'm starting the middle of this one because I want to make sure I cut through those. Let's take this and let's make it even thinner. 0.0, something like that. X, we're right there. And we'll go Shift D, X again. Right there. Again, I want these endpoints to end up in the middle of these other cuts so that'll work correctly. Okay, so there's a start. Actually, we're missing one right there. Let's take a look at what's going on there. So I have this. That's it. It wasn't added to the modifier stacks. Okay, so now let's look at this. Yeah, this one. These aren't added. Control Shift, Control minus. Yeah. And now we have something going on over here. I see right over here. These are crossing. So I tab into that, take this, move it over. So you can't have them cross in the same object. I can grab a different one. For instance, let's grab this, Shift D, I'll move him over here and I'll say E, Y, and drag him over into here. And then I can go here, Control minus, and now it'll work. You just got to make sure that you don't have any of them crossing that are in the same object. And I think that's pretty good. Now I can build this out and I can actually change some of this stuff if I want to. One thing I should mention also is that if I select one of these, I have these points right here. If I turn on this bevel, I can adjust the radius of this by the weight. So I just adjust the weight here. 8 segments, the minimum probably. That's probably pretty good right there. So that'll work. But so if I want to come in here, for instance, and add a little radius here, I can just easily do that here. This one too. Let's grab that one. And so you may say, why did he put these in like this? Well, if I had taken this one, this would have actually intersected this one. I would have had that same problem we were talking about before. So that's why that happened. Now, one thing I should mention is that this is going to be an 8K map, and these are going to be extremely thick. So I'm going to go in here and say 0.004. I'm going to say 0.002. I'm going to make them much smaller. And I want to make sure they're still cutting through where they need to be. And that's good. Let's tab into here. Now we have these radius cutouts. So let's just go ahead and add those next. So I'll go in here and select our object, and we'll go into KPACKS, and we just want to grab a cube, and we're going to add the insert right onto here, shake it down a little bit, and let's see where that goes. That's going to go over here and down. I can Control A, scale that thing, and then tab into this. Grab that face, let's move it over here. So grab these vertices, move them in like this. Okay. And let's just drag the whole thing down about halfway through. Something like that. And now we just need to add the bevel on there. So I just hit this button right here. And we've added perfectly round bevel, but 2 is too high. So I want to go like 0.05. That looks like it's pretty close. Yeah, 0.06. I'm like, that's good. Okay. And origin to geometry there. Let's grab this. Let's tab into it, say A, Shift D, and we can just use the exact same geometry for the cutter. Now I'm going to add those little blivets we talked about. So in DM Widgets 1, I have this little blivet, and I'm going to select cube, and I'm going to add the insert here, and I'll use a scroll wheel. And then before I drop it, make it there, I'm going to hold the shift key down, and I'll just hold the shift key and press there. And then I can just start moving it everywhere I want. One here. Just keep the shift key held down. And there. So another thing I can also do is I can just go into one of these and tab into it and say A, and then say G, Shift D, and then just move it around where I want. Right there. This one might be right there. Shift D X, and up here. Okay, so I need to add one more thing here. It's going to actually be reflected in how we create this map. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to tab into this guy, and I'm going to grab this edge right here. I'm going to grab that edge, and let's grab another edge. That edge, this edge right here. So I got 2 edges selected. Yeah, let's just do those. Okay, and then I'll right click on them and I'll say subdivide, and I'll say subdivide and make sure that says 2 right there. And then let's go into our 1 mode, and we're going to grab these 2 right here. And let's stretch those out a little bit, maybe like that. And then these 2 right here, stretch those out a little bit, that, and we got some here too. And those 2 and those 2, and that should be good. And let's say Control B, and I'm just going to bevel them, maybe something like this. Okay, so we've basically created these little angles here in there. And the reason why I want to do that is I want to show you how the depth thing works. And those will help us understand that a little bit better. You saw that we've got this all set out. I might want to put something in here. In fact, let's just go ahead and do that real quick. I'm going to grab the object again, and let's go in here. Let's use that one. Head insert. Let's put him in here somewhere like this. Hit F for face so he snaps to the middle of it. And that's good. And then we'll go over here and let's add the insert here. Just take this one and let's say Shift We'll move it over here just like that. And that'll actually cut out another one for us right there, automatic. And let's see what else we got. I think that's pretty good. Let's grab these. Maybe just stick those right in there like that. Okay, there's our object. Let's click on here, say convert to mesh, and we'll remove unused wire inserts there. And then we'll power save this. So now that's going to be an object. Now I want to show two different ways of creating maps. This is the more difficult way that we're doing right now, where we're actually creating some stuff and we're going to add things below it and stuff like that. But I'll show another way that's going to be a little bit more interesting in terms of how fast you can create it. So let's talk about that next. Just go ahead and take this, and we want to put this in the same place where we're going to actually create our trim sheet displacement map. And so we're going to go into Simple SCIFI FLEX, and I'll hit this displacement button right here. And now we're in a completely new scene, but we don't have that same object. So I'm going to go back to the first scene and select my object. I'll go to object menu and use link transfer data, link object to scene. Let's put it over here, right? While we're in here, let's go ahead, go to materials, and let's look at the free ones that come with KitOps Free and with KitOps Pro. And I'm going to just grab this very first one, which is the dimpled plastic. And I'm going to just add that material to here so you can see what it is. It's pretty coarse. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up here and we're going to change the actual scale from 150 to like 300. So that's a little bit better. And that'll give us a little built-in bump map. And then the color is a little bit too dark. So let's just put it up maybe something like this. And now we're good. And so now let's just go back over to our Simple SCIFI FLEX, and we're in the displacement mode. And if I hit 5, you'll see that this is our object right here that we're working with, right? You can see that's really too large. Let's take our whole object and let's just scale it down and scale it down. I want to be just a little bit outside the camera. So we zoom in, you can see here's the camera view. So I'm going to go right around there. Okay. And so if I look at this in our rendered view and let's turn on toggle the scene lighting, you'll see what we have. This is what our object looks like. Now that's done, I'm going to hide it. And actually we call this trim sheet mesh. Okay. And I'm going to turn off the toggle the scene lighting, and let's go the top view here. And I'm going to use just the default settings here and just say apply generator to map. So it's going to basically apply this DPAC to the scene, and then it's going to apply this. So let's do that. Apply generator map, and there it is. And then I want to go under background, and I want to choose a black background for this. And then I want to set the scale of the non-proportional one is 2.5, maybe small. And the proportional one, let's do those 0.5 also. I want this all small. And then I want the density to be really cranking up. Density. And let's just go, we have 3 rows. Let's go to one row. And let's just make that density high. Let's make it 2. And density here, 2. Okay, so you see that we've got a lot of density going on. Maybe I have a 3. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so that's going to give us a lot of little details inside of our object. Now, if I go back and let's just turn back on our mesh, you'll see that if I select the trim sheet, now we need to put it above something like this. Okay. And that's pretty good as far as our lighting, but I think I want this to be darker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here, and there's something that comes with Flex, which is a set of KPACKS, one called Flex 2. And in there is this CWZ depth and CW no vary. So we want this CWZ no vary, and let's add that material to the scene. And then we're going to come in here and we're going to make this material the Z no vary there. And then I can come over here and say C no vary. And what I want is I want this to be adjusted for depth. So I can just take this value down, hold the shift key down, I can adjust it a little bit less. And you can see it's getting darker as I go. So all these little pieces in between, you're starting to see they're showing up inside these holes, right? But they're still darker than this object. So this object, let's just go ahead and drop it down in color here a little bit. Let's see what we have there. Let's turn this on like this. Let's turn on our rendered view and then turn on our lighting, going back into Simple SCIFI, toggle scene lighting. There it is. So that's what we want to see. So I'm going to basically, let's adjust this something like this. That's going to be a color map Let's try the CWZ depth material for this one. And I'm just going to basically drop it down a little bit. But so I want it to be pretty much darker than anything else so that when we render it, these will be darker areas. And then we're going to end up converting this top piece to the same material, CWZ depth. And when we do that, it's going to give us a depth map. But right now we're trying to render just the texture map. So to do that, I'm going to basically save this. I'm going to save it as color because I'm going to save a different version for the depth map. In fact, if I want to, I could add a decal to this. Let's just do that real quick. So I'll go in here and let's just add some decals. So let's take this decal and I'm going to grab this surface right here. And let's take, it's just something like this. We'll just put a decal somewhere over here, something like this right here. And let's make the color. Let's go here and change the color of that. First of all, let's not make it emissive. Let's make it just a BSDF. And then let's change the color to something like orange, something like that. Too close in value. Yeah, that might be better. Anyway, we're just going to put that there for now. Actually, let's just add one more. We'll go in here. Let's add another one that doesn't really seem to have any orientation. Let's take this arrow, for instance, and put that maybe here. And then we could go back to this one, Control C, go to this one, Control V, and just do that. There we go. Okay, so we have a couple of different little icons on there. Actually, if I'm looking at this, those are too bright. Let's take the saturation all the way off of those and the value down so that we have something that's not quite so gross, because those are going to draw a lot of attention to themselves. So let's go ahead now and basically hit the render scene button. And this is going to render in EEVEE, and that's important because Cycles gives us too much noise, which is going to create a real problem for our depth map, not to mention our texture map as well. So I'm going to hit the render scene button. And it's going to render this without any shadows or with no ambient. It's got a little bit of an ambient, but we actually, speaking of that, we can render it with or without ambient. And I would suggest turning off ambient. So render it this way because we're going to use Cycles to render this in the first place. So turn off ambient and then basically say render scene. Okay, so here's our 8K image. This is what it looks like. You can see all the details in here and it has no ambient. It's got just a tiny bit of little depth area going on, a little less light getting in there, but it's really pretty good. So what I want to do is I'm going to save this and let's put it in here, the trim sheet demo. I'm going to call this one, let's call this Gets One Trim Color. And I don't want to use OpenEXR. For this, I want to use Ping, and Ping 8-bit is just fine, no alpha channel. We're going to save that as an image. I might have saved this as a 4K and not an 8K image. Actually, it just probably doesn't really matter. In fact, let's just go ahead and do that real quick. I'll go back in here and say 4K and say render scene. And here we are with the 4K one. You can tell it's still really high quality. So let's go ahead and save this again as a PNG. Okay, there we have it. Now, what I want to do next is I'm going to save this instead as color. I'm going to call this one depth. And the reason I do this is because I may want to come back and edit settings on either one of these at some point. And it might be good to do this because I had to make some changes to this file. So let me show you what I'm talking about. We'll save that. So if you recall, this was our original CWZ depth. Now what I want to do is I want to select this and I'm going to apply the CWZ depth to it like that. Okay, so now you can see that I don't really want these to be depth mapped, these little arrows. So I'm going to basically turn these off, not let these be rendered. So we'll just turn those off. Okay, now once this is done, this is our new depth map, and I'm going to turn off the toggle scene lighting. I don't want it on at all. So this is before, this is with it off. So this is off. And now I want to go ahead and generate a depth map. And so this time for sure, I'm going to use an 8K. So let's go ahead and say render scene. So here is our 8K grayscale map. And there's a couple of things to note is look here at these little edges that we did. Notice how they're ramped up. They actually have that ramp color. And that's the reason why we added that bevel to it, is so that we would get that specific ramp area. Plus, if you look inside of here, we have the same kind of ramp going on these little widgets right in here. And then we have appropriate depth map is set everywhere. So what I'll do now, I definitely want to save this as a EXR, and half or full It doesn't really matter. I've been using half before. We'll just stick with half for now. So I'm just going to leave that. And let's just call that trim depth, and we'll call this 8K EXR, and we'll save that as an image. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to test these out. So let's do that next. So to test these out, let's just go back into our regular scene here. Actually, before we do that, let's save what we're at. And I'm going to just go and do a new scene. I got this cube in here, and let's just add a bevel modifier to it like that. Make it a little bit bigger. And then let's add another bevel modifier. Make this one 8 segments, and we're going to make this much, much smaller. Okay. And then let's tab into it and say A, U, and we'll just do a cube projection unwrap. So if I look at this in our UV editing, you'll see it looks like this. Actually, let's do what Smart UV Project does. That makes it look like that. That might be a little better. Let's just do that. Okay. And then let's go back in here. And what I'll do is go into that. Remember that Flex 2 folder we talked about. I'm going to grab this thing called displaced material, CW displaced material, and I'm going to add that material to this there. And there it is showing. Yeah. So let's just go ahead and make our own displaced material, and I'll say new, and we'll just take this, Control T, move it out like that. And we want to load, the mapping is UV. So I think I could just basically delete these and go in here and say open, and we're going to open the color, gets one trim color 4K. So we're going to open that up, and there's our object. And then I'm going to Shift D this down to here, and I want to close that. I'm opening a height map. So let's go back, or the depth map there, that goes there. Now this will go also, we'll take that color from here and we'll put it into the normal map here. And we want a bump node there. And we want this going into the height, not the normal. So there, and you can see, it's working. It's not great, but it does what we want. Next thing we want to do is I need to go over the modifiers, and I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier, and I'm going to set it to simple, and I want it to be maybe 3 for now. Let's just turn this off. Q, let's show wireframe. Let's look at that. Okay, so that's what 3 looks like. Let's go. We want a little more dense. 5. Something like that's probably a little better. Although this second bevel needs to be 1 segment. That'll save us a little room for sure. And let's make this 7. Okay, that's good. Let's go 6. So we have, you can see this is the density that we're playing with right now. And after that, we'll just add a modifier called a displacement one. And what we want to do here, and the reason why we're using displacement is there's a couple reasons. First, we could set up a displacement in the material, but then it's only going to render inside of cycles. But the reason why we're doing one here is because one, it'll render an EEVEE, but also we have control over every object we apply it to. So if we apply it to some other object, like this surface here, for instance, or a cylinder, whatever, we can adjust these strengths and mid-levels. Whereas if we have one material, every time we adjust one, it's going to adjust it for every material. And in this case, we're going to call this the trim displace. We'll just call that trim displace material. So we use a displacement modifier instead of using a displacement over here for those 2 reasons. Okay. So to do that, we need a new texture, and we click on this little button over here, which just takes us down into this. And I'm going to just go over here, and I'm going to take that depth map, that 8K depth map, and I don't need the alpha, but everything else is good. And I'm going to go back to our modifiers, and I'm going to set this to UV. Okay. And now you're starting to see, let's turn off our face orientation, starting to see how it works. But what's going on is as we adjust this mid-level, you can see it pushes these out. So if I set this to something smaller, it doesn't push them out. That's too big. So 0.4, let's try that. I want to adjust that number so I don't get that push out feature. In fact, if I turn off this one, let's turn off this one. This will give us even a little better, 0.4. Yeah, let's just delete this one here. Maybe 0.3, oops, 0.45. There, that's okay. That 0.4 looks like it's going to be about right for us. I could go a little higher, but anyway, so that's really showing that this thing is working pretty good, but the angles aren't very good. So we talked about that earlier, is when you have angles, you're going to have some weird things. Before we do that, let's just go ahead and adjust just a little bit. We'll go to UV editing, and I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to just go into local mode, and let's take this and say, this is one of the technique I use, but I'm going to basically say select boundary. It's like the boundary loop, right? So I take that and then I can control E, or I think I can go edge and mark seam. And then I can hit A and I can say U and I can see just unwrap. And so it's going to unwrap it in, in a different way. So that way I know that this one, 3, and that are the same. So I select all 3 of these. Here's our trim sheet here. So I'll say A and I'm going to rotate them, R to rotate, and G. Let's move them something like this. And over here, I'm going to say Q. I'll turn off the show overlays. I've got it mapped to my Q thing, and I'll go to my EEVEE rendering, and you can start to see what's going on here, right? So these are the ones we're working with, are these, and this is wrapping nicely around that. And I can scale it bigger if I want. If I want a little more detail, I can just do that. And that's going to give me a little more detail as well. Let's go back into our layout and let's go into camera view and grab something that we might like that. And let's just look at what we have for, you can see that, yeah, that's where we're at. Let's use a different lighting model. There. And that's what we're at. And so if I want to make this a little darker, what I might do is say Shift A, color, and we'll put a curves in here, RGB curves, drop it in here. And I'll just move this down a little bit. I can adjust how dark this object is from there. If I want to make it a little more metallic, I can just jack it up like this and drop the roughness down. Maybe make this up, maybe more like that. So you're starting to get the idea how easy this is to work with. The problem is that if I look at this, you'll see that I've got a ton of polygons, and not to mention that, but also let's go back and turn the roughness back up and the metallic down and the color down. You'll notice that the angles are just not that good. So let's go ahead and talk about that for just a second. So what I'll do is I'm going to actually just jack this up to something like 8. And when I do that, you'll see that, yeah, it really, gets the angles well, but look at how many faces we've got going on here. Quite a few, right? And in fact, to be honest with you, the way I would do this is I would probably go even more. And I'm going to show you that 9 here. So it'll take a while, but we're going to have a ton of faces. So we've got 12 million. So that's a good model. And so the way I work from here is I'm going to go into local mode and I'm going to say Shift A, mesh, cube. I'm going to add a cube, G, move it over here. I'm going to go into a solid view right here. And I'm going to tab into this guy, the new one, and I'm going to go under mesh, clean up, and I want to say decimate geometry. And I want this to be at 0.1. Okay, and then I tab out of it. And the reason for that is that decimate geometry, you want it to start at 0.1 when we're starting this one. So I want to basically take this, say, object, apply visual geometry to mesh. So basically going to give us all these modifiers over here are going to be processed, and we're going to end up with 12 million faces, which, yeah, I know is a lot. And so now that's done, what I'll do is I'll tab into this, and then I'll hit A, and then with everything selected, I'll go under mesh, clean up, and I'll say decimate geometry. And it's going to do it at that 0.1. So I don't have to go through and adjust it afterwards. So this will probably take, for 12 million, this will probably take, I would say, maybe a minute to do on my i9 computer. This is not using the GPU, so it's just using the CPU. So it'll take a minute. I've done actually up to 30 million. Sometimes I'll use 30 million on really complex objects. But for this one, 12.5 is about what I typically, I typically shoot for somewhere between 9 and 12. It really depends on what it looks like. If it looks good at lower resolutions, then that's fine as well. Okay, so that took a couple minutes to get done. Now I can hit the A button to make sure I select everything again, and that little dialog goes away. And now I'm going to tab out of this. And I've got 1.25, which is still too many. But what I want to do now is, let's just go into this view where we have some colors and stuff going on. And let's right click on it. I'm going to say shade auto smooth. And then I'm going to come over here. I'm going to add a weighted normal modifier. And I'm going to set it to keep sharp and face influence. Okay. Now I'll go back in here, tab A. This will go much faster this time. And I'll say mesh, cleanup, decimate geometry. It's going to use a 0.1 again, but this will take just, I don't know, under 30 seconds maybe or so. It's pretty fast because it's only 1.2 million faces. And so I'm going to let this go ahead and go. And you see it's already done. And I can go under here with this still at 0.1, just leaving it there. And I can turn this on and I can look at it and say, does that seem to work pretty good for me? And I can say, yeah, that does. Although you can see we have some issues with some tearing over here, which I probably would never have located that there anyway. And I'll show you how to fix that. But I think that's pretty good. So that's now, if we go back in here and we see we have 1.25, you say, where did that come from? That's over here in statistics. That's what that does. So we're in here. The weighted normal looks pretty good. It all is working well. And so let's just real quick go into UV editing and fix those little problems that we were talking about. So I'll grab the C. I just want to grab this and that, those faces and those faces. And you can see they're all up here. And then I'll select these, make sure they're selected S0 and say G, just move them into some gray spot that I know they're going to work. And that's good. And then is there another one? Yeah, this one probably. Tab into this. And I'll use a C. So I select these there. And go over here, A, scale 0, G, move them somewhere. Okay. And yeah, that just fixed those nicely. So there's our object. It's 100,000 faces. You could probably continue to work on it by tab into it and say A and say X, limited dissolve. And that gets you down to a few more. And you can do this maybe once, clean up. You could basically say degenerate dissolve. And that got rid of 122 edges and 122 faces, but you better be careful with that one. That'll end up screwing you up sometimes. You'll get some weird stuff. It might be that right there, in fact. That we just need to remap it, just like we did earlier. But anyway, so you're getting the idea. This is how this works, and I'll fix that too. But that's it. Now, the next thing I want to show you is how we create trim maps, but in a much faster way, right? So we're going to use this one for our scene, but we're going to also create another set of trim maps using Flex in a much quicker way. And so we're going to do that next.